A tremendous guest with us today. David Rohlander joins us. He is an amazing guy. I wanted to have him on today to chat about a lot of different things. Our guest, he is the author of the CEO Code, Create a Great Company and Inspire People to Greatness, with practical advice from an experienced executive and someone who works with organizations to mentor, coach their executives and managers to be highly effective on a variety of levels. The CEO Code identifies, clarifies the knowledge, attitudes, skills, behaviors needed to become a leader who inspires people to become better than they imagined. His book takes the talented and makes them better. His philosophy takes the driven and drives them to new heights. And his coaching hones abilities in 3 critical areas required for success: communication, execution, and operations. In other words, the CEO. Welcome to the broadcast, David. How are you, my friend?
Hey, well, I'm well, sir. How are you?
Pretty good, actually. Let's start at the beginning here. I understand you have essentially taken your work as a coach and a mentor, along with decades of experience as an Air Force combat fighter pilot and successful businessman, and created a book that embodies your life's work to help people and companies perform better. That is admirable, my friend.
Well, thank you.
We've got David Rohlander with us today. He's the author of the CEO Code, Create a Great Company and Inspire People to Greatness, with practical advice from an experienced executive and someone who works with organizations to mentor and coach their executives and managers to highly effective on a variety of levels. Now, first, give us an overview of the book and why you decided to write it, my friend.
Well, you know, that's interesting. The book is a life's work. I've been working with executives and had my own companies and done my own thing for many years, and this book is a culmination of all of those lessons that I've learned, the bloody situations that I've unfortunately been in on occasion, the blood and carnage I've seen in other companies, and what worked and what didn't work. And so what I've done is put it all together in what I think is 3 very essential but simple concepts, and that is, as you said, communication, execution, operations. That's what's needed to get it done.
We've got a tremendous guest with us today. David Rohlander joins us. The first section, and essentially the foundation of the book, is about communication. A business I am in as a radio talk show host. We are all communicating with words, body language, various other signals all the time. Share with us your levels of communication and give a brief explanation of the most important aspect.
Clearly, James, the most important aspect is effective communication. And what I discuss in the book is that effective communication requires more than talent. It involves trust, respect, understanding, empathy, and resolution. It's really an art form. It's not something mechanical that you can just do. And without those 5 ingredients, I find that people do not effectively communicate. They might be great broadcasters, i.e. they can talk good, maybe they can read from a teleprompter real well, or they can give a good speech, but communication is oh so much more. And trust is lost when somebody doesn't do what they say they're going to do, or when they behave a certain way and that belies what they've actually said. The same for respect, understanding, empathy, and then ultimately resolution. So that's the core. That's the most vital part.
Our guest is David Rohlander, author of the CEO Code, Create a Great Company and Inspire People to Greatness, with practical advice from an experienced executive and someone who works with organizations to mentor and coach their executives and managers to be highly effective on a variety of levels. David, I'll tell you, your book is filled with success stories where you have turned people and organizations around. I am very curious to know, when a CEO brings you to a train and mentor their personnel, what are the most common errors you find in management philosophy and corporate culture?
The biggest thing that I have found over and over and over again is a lot of people talk a good game, but their behavior is not compatible. In order to have real structural growth, health, and vibrancy, the person, the leader's concept of the company's culture and of their own philosophy and values not only has to be clearly understood by the leader, they have to effectively communicate it in written form and in verbal form, but most important, they have to lead by modeling the behavior that illustrates their philosophy and their culture. Ideally, they shouldn't have to say a word. You should be able to go to any person that knows the leader, and they should all come up with the same basic response because they see it in their behavior.
We've got a guest today that is just out of this world as far as everything that he has as far as knowledge goes. The CEO Code is the brand new book. David Rohlander joins us. Your book is broken down into 3 sections: communication, execution, operations. Now, leadership has to be a vital part of what you teach in your business and what you wrote in the book. You were in the military, so indulge me for a moment. I heard a story about General Dwight David Eisenhower before he was president explaining the concept of leadership to someone. He put down a straight piece of string, then he pushed it from behind and it crumpled. Then he straightened it out again and pulled it along, thus demonstrating leadership. Tell us the most important tenets of leadership according to David Rohlander.
Well, that story about Dwight D. Eisenhower is very, very illustrative, I think, of what we talk about in the book, and it's an excellent metaphor for leadership. And what's going on there when you pull the string is you are leading from the front. You can't lead from behind, although some people try and propagate that idea. You have to lead from the front, and that means you have to not only set the example, but you have to plow the ground, you have to make the decision, you have to be courageous, and you have to be out there vulnerable, visible, and demonstrating what it is you want your people to do.
David Rohlander joins us. The CEO Code is the latest book from this incredible guest. Military training can be a good foundation for success in life. Now, you were a fighter pilot who flew over 200 combat missions over Vietnam, a highly stressful job, to put it mildly. How did your military training and experience contribute to success, both professionally and personally?
I think the biggest thing that I got from the military is discipline. The discipline to do what you say you're going to do and to actually do it. Some people talk about, I'm going to try and do this, or I'm going to try and do that. That word basically is useless. We don't want to see leaders trying things or people trying to be there on time or to do this. The only thing that really matters is what you do. And so in the military, it's very, very important to do what you say you're going to do. In fact, when you're flying over enemy territory, if you don't do what you intended to do, you get shot down. The consequences are rather severe. So in the fire of battle, you learn that you've got to do it. And you have to be well rehearsed and trained. That's another thing I learned, that the only problem or the only issue that's going to really shoot you out of the sky or is going to really cause you a problem is the problem that you didn't think about in advance, that you didn't prepare for. The beauty of being an efficient and effective fighter pilot is you've thought of all the possible scenarios and you have an automatic response because you've trained for it, you've visualized it, you've seen it, you're ready for it emotionally, and therefore it doesn't really matter. You just do what you have to do. And a great example of that is old Sully, the guy that landed that airliner in the Hudson River. He just did what he knew he had to do. No fuss, no muss, no emotion. Why? Because he trained for it. It was just an automatic response. A lot of people think, oh, it was so amazingly heroic. Well, I don't take any credit away from the fact that he did it, but he did what he was trained to do. Same thing happens with a combat fighter pilot. In fact, when you deviate from what you've been trained to do, that's when you get shot down.
Our guest is David Rohlander. The CEO Code is the latest project from this incredible person. I'm going to read the first lines from part 2 of the CEO entitled Execution, and ask for some clarification. I found this a telling part of the book. Quote, are you striving for success or significance? Both success and significance necessitate living life based on predetermined personal values. Success often relates to the accumulation of possessions with goals of having. Significance is all about impact and influence with goals of becoming. David, please unpack this for the audience with any splinter items such as happiness or fulfillment.
You know, that's a very, very good question. What I find is that there are 3 basic types of leaders. There are political leaders, people that are primarily looking for consensus, and that's why they do what they're doing. They don't necessarily have the other 2 aspects of leadership or types of leadership. Another one is the results-driven leader, and that's the leader that actually is just trying to get results. They're trying to make a buck. They're trying to make it happen. Come hell or high water, let's make it happen. Go for it. And that's your result-driven leader. And then the third type of leader, which I have a preference for, is the value-driven leader. The value-driven leader is someone who clearly understands what they believe in, what their values are, and everything about what they do illustrates and is in line with those values. Now, what that means is, if you wanted to play with it mentally for a minute, if you're a politically driven leader, you're probably not into results or into values, by definition, if you accept this model. If you're a driven leader, then you're not going to do things just for political reasons, to schmooze or to make people happy and smile. You're going to do what has to be done to get the results. And if you're a value-driven leader, you're going to do what is important. And the biggest and best example of that I've ever heard of a value-driven leader is Jim Burke when he was leading Johnson & Johnson back years ago when they had the Tylenol scare. They were very, very much, Johnson & Johnson was very, very much into caring for people, caring for nurses, caring for patients. They cared above all, beyond making a profit. They cared and wanted to do something with integrity. What happened was the Tylenol scare came. Someone died, they thought, from taking a Tylenol pill, and they immediately pulled all the Tylenol off all the shelves, and it cost them a ton of money. But what they did was they lived based on their values. So that's a perfect illustration of a value-driven leader, quite different than a political leader or a result-driven leader.
We've got David Rohlander joining us today. The CEO Code is the latest project. We're talking with him about this fascinating book, The CEO Code. In the last section of the communication section of the book, a subsection of part 1 called Resolution, you relate your experience first in the Navy and switching over to the Air Force, how the transition required you to go through rigorous training in times in a fairly short amount of time. Now, you say experience taught you how to work hard and keep focused on the end result, while also learning the value of courageous and creative decision-making. In your travels, are these traits seriously lacking in large cross-section of business and society?
I think that there is a lack, and I don't know that it's universal, but there definitely are spots where there is a lack and where people are not living up to their values and are not making courageous and creative decisions. And part of the reason for that is because they're letting other outside influences dominate their actions and their decision making. You know, there's a fellow up in Connecticut, a professor that came up with the idea of internal or external locus of control. An internal locus of control means that you believe and you act as if you control and can influence outcomes. An external locus of control is someone that believes and acts as if, oh, poor me, I can't do anything about it. I have to let the government solve the problem, or I have to have somebody else do it, or give me, take me, buy me, feed me, that kind of a mentality. That's an external locus of control. It can lead to people that are classified as victims, people that don't really control their own destiny. So when you're making decisions, you have to really know whether you are focused on internal or an external locus of control. And then as a leader, when you make those decisions, you have to realize that a lot of your people may have primarily an external locus of control mentality, which means they have to be encouraged and they have to be groomed and trained and helped so that they can get things done. So, yeah, I think that there is a lack in society quite a bit for people that are really that courageous and creative and are willing to just really stand up in the heat of battle and do what has to be done.
David Rohlander, the CEO Code. If one reads history and biography, which I try and do, it can be very striking what makes people highly successful. People are driven forward by ambition, greed, bitterness, desire for material wealth, even revenge. Many feel successful politicians have, for example, uncanny memories. This is used to great effect in building trust when campaigning, or someone like Steve Jobs, who was able to inspire both fear and awe in pushing his organization and personnel forward. David Rohlander, can you give us some common personality traits in highly successful people?
I find that the most successful people are well balanced. Now, you can be very, very successful in one particular discipline or strength. You know, there's been a lot of research done at Harvard on different types of intelligence, and there's physical intelligence, which is kinesthetic intelligence. There's interpersonal intelligence, which is another form of intelligence. There are many different things, musical intelligence, spatial intelligence, and we all have different amounts of natural talents. And when we go after those natural talents to the exclusion of other things, we might be very, very successful in one particular thing, but we don't have balance. And balance, I think, is a worthwhile goal. Now, not everybody agrees, and that's fine. Some people are purely money motivated, and they think that money is the end all be all, and that's all that they do. And what I find with clients that are that way is often that means that they don't give the same regard to their children or to their spouses or to the institution of marriage or to some of those other kinds of things. It could be to charity, to helping other people, and that is because they're just driven for the almighty dollar, for the buck. And so they're really usually pretty shallow people. I don't care how rich they are. They're usually pretty shallow because they only have one focus. They're a one-side-of-the-street walking dog, if you will. And it can be money or it can be athletics, like some people are workaholics, some people are workoutaholics. They're so into fitness that they exclude everything else from their life. Well, you can choose to do that, but I don't think that that's necessarily the best way to have a significant and a successful life, although if that's what you want to do, go for it.
David Rohlander is our guest. CEO Code is the latest project. You recently started a networking group in Orange County, California called the Maestro Group. This is a group of highly quality people coming together to exchange information, views, strategies, and much more. In a recent radio interview on Cody Talks, one of our good friends, someone I happen to know, the subject of quality network as opposed to quantity networking was brought up. Can you expand on that subject and also understand you want to take the Maestro Group nationally? Tell us about this as well.
You know, this is amazing because I started this group. I like the word maestro because I have an emotional involvement. You know, we do many things that we do because of emotion, although we like to say it's because of logic and reason and facts and figures, but ultimately emotion is the trigger that makes things happen.
Yeah.
And several years ago, my son, who happens to be a very gifted artist, was studying in Florence, Italy, and the instructor the Italian instructor and the instructor from the university in California were walking around looking the first day at all of the students, and they were drawing and painting a model. And they stopped behind my son and just stood there and didn't say anything for a few minutes. And then finally the Italian instructor said to the other instructor, the maestro. In other words, Nathan, my son, the artist, was clearly the maestro in the group. The person that is at the highest level of achievement. And so the Maestro Group, or the Maestro Network, as we like to call it, is an environment that attracts people that are very highly skilled in their professions. And it is not a networking group in the traditional way. What we've done is we've used the core concept of the book, The CEO Code, to model and illustrate how to communicate and how to behave in our group. So we have time to communicate, and it's all about developing relationships, identifying each other's resources, and getting results for all of the participants. It's a different model. It's virtually free, as all they do is pay for breakfast. We use the CEO Code as the model for the behavior in the group, and what is absolutely amazing, James, is it's like a magnet. People are attracted to it. They're enjoying it, and we're not talking about normal people. We're talking about very high achievers. So I'm very excited about it. The model seems to really have resonance with high-achieving people, and we are seriously thinking of we're going to be taking it across the country. So we're looking for people that want to mimic and have the same type of a group for them to develop their business, their network, and create relationships, resources, and then ultimately results. Very exciting.
Amazing stuff. David Rohlander, the CEO Code, with us today. Right now, graduates around the country are seeking employment, and the job market is not very strong and, in fact, pretty weak. Many people in such a situation, like housewives who enter the marketplace after the kids are gone, end up starting their own companies rather than wait around. I asked this question to bring up a key topic. Failure. Many of the most accomplished people in history failed many times before hitting it big or even got rich, went broke, got rich again, etc. How could failure be a positive force in achieving success?
I love that question, James. You know, there's a book written by Harvey Mackay, the envelope salesman from Minneapolis, who basically writes a book about being fired. And he talks to Larry King, he talks to Donald Trump, he talks to all these people that were fired. They got their laundry cleaned for them, right? And what is exciting about getting fired or making a mistake or having a failure is you learn from it. In fact, when you're successful, when everything goes your way, you can become rather insulated, euphoric, and almost Pollyanna-ish and think that you have a golden rear end. And the reality is, when you have a failure, when you make a mistake, you have an incredible opportunity to learn, to see why did that happen and how can you avoid doing it again. I know in my own personal life, failures, mistakes have been the biggest learning and the best opportunity that I've had. And what I try to encourage organizations to do is to build a culture where when people make a mistake or there is a failure, rather than being chastised or punished or slapped on the wrist, the culture is such that it's an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to help others so that they don't make the same mistake, because we don't have enough time to make all the mistakes ourselves. We need to learn from other people's failures and mistakes. So failure, I think, is a very, very healthy thing. It's a good thing. It takes courage to fail because you don't always know. I mean, if you're never failing, it's probably because you're not trying anything significant.
I have to agree, my friend. Well, David Rohlander has been our guest today, the CEO Code. Before we let you go, my friend, what's the most important thing readers should take away from the CEO Code?
How to effectively communicate. And it takes time, it takes practice, and it takes real effort and real study. It's not something that you can just read about and do. It takes real study, and that's what the book is all about, because effective communication requires trust, respect, understanding, empathy, which is a very emotional thing, and resolution. It is an art form. It is an art, and that comes with time and effort.
Well, David, thanks for doing this, my friend. I really appreciated the conversation. Thanks for being on with us today, my friend.
Well, thank you, sir.